to consumers across the state. KTVU's Tom Vakar crunched the numbers and spoke with some soon-to-be recipients.
Individuals making less than $250,000 a year, or $500,000 as a couple, will get a stimulus check from Sacramento for $200 to $1,050. Now, how much and how soon depends on a formula which considers you.
And I told him, I'll come campaign for him or against him, whichever will help the most. Folks, look, both Ben as well, they're strong and they're principled, they're effective. Keep them. You need them. Hell, I need them. You've got a great congressional delegation, including Steny Hoyer, who's been a friend for a long time.
Up to $500 in tax rebates this year. According to the Virginia Department of Taxation, almost anybody who had a tax liability in 2021 will receive a tax rebate if they apply, with up to $250 available for individual filers. The term tax liability refers to the amount of tax that an individual owes to the state throughout the year, minus any credits, subtractions, or deductions. Anybody who owes the government money in Virginia, therefore, can use the tax rebates to offset the debt and reduce the amount they owe. According to the Virginia Department of Taxation website, rebates will begin to be issued by the fall of this year. The state website described how anybody eligible for the rebates should file their taxes by July 1st. To receive the rebate in October, the rebates will be issued on October 16th and received by eligible recipients on October 31st. Anybody who filed a tax return should expect to receive the rebate without applying, and individuals who receive refunds by direct deposit will receive direct deposits in their bank accounts. So if you're among those who receive checks by mail, be sure that your mailing address is up to date so there are no delays in your payments. Direct relief for everybody is finally beginning for everybody that is eligible. Checks worth up to $800 have been approved by lawmakers and will be automatically deposited for many low-income households. Folks, the Consumer Price Index hit a 40-year high in June with an increase of 9.1% over last year, before holding steady in July. According to analysis, inflation is costing American families about $500 per month in higher prices, and Americans are feeling the pain, with a recent poll finding that 24 to 34% of voters list inflation as the most urgent issue facing the country. In response to the crisis, Congress passed multiple stimulus bills. Combined, these legislative actions increased the federal deficit by an estimated $5 trillion. But GOP lawmakers have insisted that more spending will contribute to inflation. Nearly 2 years of rising inflation and declining real wages, combined with a looming recession, have caused Democratic Party approval ratings to plummet, and politicians are worried. Oregon lawmakers recently approved a $600 one-time stimulus check to low-income workers who were on the job in the early days of the crisis. The payments go to people in Oregon who claimed earned income tax credit in 2020, a tax break for low-income working households. The Oregon Department of Revenue said about 245,000 people in Oregon will be eligible, and with payments limited to one per household.
Historic joblessness. Businesses struggling to stay open. So much lost learning for our kids in school. But we've come a long way. In 18 months, a record number of Americans are working, 10 million since I came to office. Businesses are growing. Our schools are open. And folks, it just didn't happen. It took a lot of hard work. It took a plan that we stuck to, even in the face of unrelenting attacks from the most powerful. But we never gave up. We never gave in. And we're delivering for the American people now. And now, even our critics have been forced to acknowledge real progress. A record of big accomplishments, matched by few administrations in history. 10 million new jobs, more than we've ever created before at this point in anyone's presidency. 3.5% unemployment rate, near a record low in the history of this country. A 15% drop in child poverty compared to 2 years ago.
Breaking news, everybody. Some Americans may have to wait a bit longer than others before they can receive their new fourth stimulus check. The IRS has already confirmed that groups of people will receive larger relief payments than others. These checks may be worth up to $1,000. Now, millions of people are still awaiting their tax refunds from the IRS. However, there is a silver lining. The money may be accruing interest and rates are poised to be jumped in October. And according to its website, the IRS service generally pays interest on refunds that are delayed by more than 45 days after the filing deadline. Interest rates are adjusted every quarter depending on the federal short-term rate, and the IRS announced this week that the current interest rate is 5%, but is slated to increase to 6% on October 1st. Still, there is a downside, which is that the interest paid by the IRS is taxable. The U.S. Government Accountability Office reported that the IRS interest payments surged 33% in the fiscal year 2021, with the tax collecting agency paying out nearly $3.3 billion for individual returns. If you are still waiting for your refund, you can track its status using the IRS Where's My Refund tool. As of late May, the IRS still had roughly 21 million paper returns that still needed to be processed. That is a 7% increase from the same time last year, when there were 20 million unprocessed paper returns. Economists have stated, unfortunately at this point the backlog is still crushing the IRS, its employees, and most importantly taxpayers. These processing delays are creating unprecedented financial difficulties for millions of taxpayers and outright hardships for many. Although more than 90% of taxpayers submitted their returns electronically last year at the request of the IRS, some 17 million sent paper filings, exacerbating the pileup of returns. It is disproportionately older Americans who filed their returns via mail. In a statement, the IRS disputed the tax figures presented by the National Taxpayer Advocate, suggesting the actual backlog is closer to 19 million, down slightly from last year's level. The heap of unprocessed returns stem from crisis-related disruptions, including a worker shortage, the task of administering millions of stimulus checks, and adapting to other tax changes and the different relief packages, like boosted child tax credit payments. I also know many of you are wondering where your tax refund money is. It's a question so many have asked weeks after Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb signed a bill that would give taxpayers a refund. For months now, we've all dealt with higher prices and it has not been fun. State lawmakers say they hope a new round of checks and tax refunds approved in a bill that passed during last month's special session can help a little bit.
Congress a few years ago mandated that states would have a wildlife action plan. In our state, in Missouri, we have great outdoor recreation, we have great hunting, we have great fishing. For a long time, one of the oldest and most successful conservation commissions in the country was funded just by hunting and fishing licenses. Our state added 40 years ago a sales tax for conservation and parks. I don't know any state that's done a better job trying to fund its own efforts for conservation, but the congressionally mandated state wildlife action plans, effort to be sure that we don't have things moved to the endangered species list. For that plan to be successful, we need more than the amount of money that Missourians have been able to dedicate to that. Senator Heinrich and I introduced the Recovering America's Wildlife Act.